The most exclusive restaurant in Madrid fell silent when the Japanese millionaire Keiko Tanaka began breathing heavily, clutching her chest as her eyes filled with terror. The waitstaff ran around confused, not understanding what was happening. The wealthy patrons looked on uncomfortably, and the manager desperately called an ambulance in English, while the woman continued whispering incomprehensible words in Japanese. No one knew Keiko was having a panic attack because she had recognized among the diners the man who had killed her son 30 years earlier in an accident that was never solved. But when Sophia Nakamura, a part-time waitress working her way through college, approached and spoke to her gently in perfect Japanese, everything changed. Keiko clung to her like an anchor of salvation and whispered the truth she had kept hidden for decades. Her son's killer was sitting at table number 7, and she had come to Spain for one reason only: revenge. Madrid's El Dorado restaurant was the kind of place where the world's powerful gathered to decide the fate of nations, corporations, and corporate. That November night, among candlelit tables costing more than an average salary, sat Russian oligarchs, American magnates, and European aristocrats whispering about million-dollar investments. But everyone noticed when she walked in. Keiko Tanaka was 72 years old and carried a dignity that filled the room. She wore a black silk kimono that must have been worth a fortune, her silver hair in a perfect bun, and at her neck a pearl necklace that shimmered in the low light. She was accompanied by 2 men in dark suits who exuded the discreet professional aura typical of high-level bodyguards. Sophia Nakamura watched the scene from her station behind the service bar. At 22, the Spanish-Japanese girl worked part-time as a waitress to pay for her international economics studies at Complutense University. Her paternal grandmother was Japanese and had taught her the language and traditions, but Sophia had never expected that knowledge to become so important. The restaurant manager, Maximiliano Conti, personally received Mrs. Tanaka with the respect owed to someone whose wealth was estimated at over $3 billion. Keiko was the widow of a major Japanese industrialist and now controlled an empire spanning electronics to luxury goods. Her presence in the restaurant was an event that would be talked about for weeks in Madrid's high finance circles. Sophia immediately noticed something odd about the woman's behavior. As she was escorted to her reserved table, Keiko obsessively examined the other diners as if searching for someone specific. Her eyes moved with surgical precision from one face to another, and when they landed on a distinguished man around 60 sitting at table number 7, Sophia saw something that made her shudder appear on Keiko Tanaka's face, an expression of pure hatred, immediately followed by something that looked like terror. The man at table 7 was evidently Spanish. He was dining with what appeared to be his wife and 2 other couples. He laughed heartily while telling some work anecdote. He had no idea someone was watching him so intently. Keiko sat at her table but didn't touch the menu. She ordered only green tea and remained seated rigidly with her eyes fixed on the man at table 7. Her bodyguards noticed the tension and exchanged worried glances but didn't intervene. Sophia, who had learned to read people during her years in the restaurant industry, understood something significant was happening. The situation escalated around 10 p.m. The man from table 7 stood up to go to the restroom and, as he did, turned slightly toward Keiko's direction. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and what happened next shocked the entire restaurant. Keiko began breathing heavily, bringing one hand to her chest while the other gripped the table. Her eyes filled with tears, and she began whispering something in Japanese, her voice growing increasingly agitated. The bodyguards immediately approached, but she waved them off with frantic gestures, continuing to stare at the man, who now watched her with curiosity and slight concern. Manager Kondai rushed over, extremely worried. A crisis involving such an important client in his restaurant could mean the end of his career. He began speaking in English, asking if she needed medical help, if he should call an ambulance. But Keiko kept repeating phrases in Japanese that no one understood, growing more and more agitated. It was then that Sophia made the most important decision of her life. She left her post behind the bar and gently approached Keiko, kneeling beside her chair. In perfect Japanese, with the accent her grandmother had taught her, she whispered, "Tanaka-san, watashi wa anata o tasakuru koto ga dekomasu. Nani ga koda no desu ka?" Miss Tanaka, I can help you. What has happened? The effect was immediate. Keiko turned to Sophia with eyes full of desperation and relief, as if she'd seen an angel. She clung to the young woman's hand and began speaking rapidly in Japanese, the words pouring out like an overflowing river after years of forced silence. What Keiko told Sophia in those frantic minutes would change their lives forever. 30 years earlier, her 18-year-old son, Hiroshi, had died in a traffic accident in Madrid during a student exchange. The driver had fled, the case had been closed, but Keiko had never stopped searching for the truth. She had spent millions on private investigators, followed every lead, and finally found her son's killer. The man at table 7 was Roberto Castilla, then a young scion of a Madrid industrial family. He had hit Hiroshi while driving drunk and then fled. Using family connections to cover everything up, Keiko had taken 30 years to gather enough evidence and locate him. Now she had come to Spain with a precise plan to ruin him economically, socially, legally, socially legal. But seeing his face in person, hearing his laughter, had brought back pain so intense it triggered a panic attack. Sophia listened silently as Keiko explained she intended to destroy this man piece by piece, just as he had destroyed her family. But what neither Keiko nor Sophia knew was that Roberto Castilla had recognized them both. He had heard their exchange in Japanese and understood his past had finally come to light. And now he was planning his move to eliminate them both before they could ruin the life he had built on the ashes of that young man who died 30 years earlier. In the days following that dramatic encounter at the restaurant, Sophia found herself catapulted into a world of secrets, vengeance, and denied justice far beyond her experience as a college student. Keiko Tanaka wasn't just a wealthy widow seeking truth. She was a woman who had dedicated half her life to planning the methodical destruction of the man who had killed her son. Keiko invited Sophia to her suite at the Hotel Villa Magna, a luxury apartment she had transformed into a veritable operations center. The walls were covered with photographs, documents, maps, and a detailed timeline of 30 years of investigation. At the center of it all was a photo of Hiroshi Tanaka, an 18-year-old young man smiling with eyes full of dreams he would never realize. The story Keiko told Sophia was one of injustice that had spanned decades. In 1994, Hiroshi was in Madrid to perfect his Spanish before starting university. He was a brilliant young man, passionate about art and literature, who dreamed of becoming a cultural bridge between Japan and Spain. The night of the accident, he was walking home from the library when Roberto Castilla, then 24, had hit him at high speed. Witnesses had seen a black BMW flee the scene, but the investigation had been incredibly superficial. The Castilla family had enormous political and economic influence, and the case was quickly closed as a hit and run with an unknown driver. Hiroshi died instantly, his dreams shattered along with his body, but Keiko had never given up. She had hired private investigators, bribed officials to access confidential documents, followed every lead for decades. The breakthrough had come 2 years earlier when she managed to identify Roberto as the responsible party through a combination of modern technology and infinite patience. Sophia listened, fascinated, as Keiko showed her the accumulated evidence. Photos of the damaged BMW repaired in secret, testimonies from mechanics who had been paid to stay silent, recordings of incriminating conversations obtained over the years. Roberto Castilla had built his current fortune, in part thanks to never having paid for that crime. He hadn't faced costly trials or the reputational damage that would have followed. But what shocked Sophia most was discovering that Roberto hadn't stopped at that vehicular homicide. In the 30 years that followed, he had accumulated a list of financial crimes, corruption, and ethically questionable behavior that made the 1994 accident pale in comparison. He had become a serial predator in the business world, ruining small family businesses to expand his empire, corrupting politicians, evading taxes on an industrial scale. Keiko had planned her revenge with Japanese precision. She didn't want to simply kill him or have him arrested. She wanted him to lose everything he had built on her son's blood. She wanted his children to see their father for who he really was. She wanted his wife to discover she had married a killer. She wanted his partners to abandon him when the truth came out. Keiko's plan had already been in motion for months. She had secretly acquired shares in several of Roberto's partner companies. She had gathered compromising information about his illegal dealings. She had prepared a media campaign that would destroy his reputation. But that night at the restaurant, seeing the face of her son's killer had emotionally overwhelmed her. Sophia found herself increasingly involved in this story of denied justice. Keiko needed someone who could move freely in Madrid society, someone who spoke both Spanish and Japanese perfectly. Are you enjoying the story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now we continue with the video. Someone who could be her eyes and ears where she couldn't reach. The young woman was perfect for that role, but Sophia didn't know that agreeing to help Keiko would put her in mortal danger. Roberto Castilla had recognized the threat the two women represented and was already planning their elimination. He had contacts in Madrid's criminal underworld, people who for the right price were willing to make anyone disappear. And Keiko Tanaka, however rich and powerful she was just a foreigner alone in a country she didn't truly know. The war between Keiko and Roberto was about to begin, a war that would involve not only them, but also the people they loved. Sophia was about to discover that sometimes the pursuit of justice can bring consequences no one is prepared to face. Keiko's vengeance began with a precision that reflected 30 years of methodical planning. Sophia became her unofficial assistant, using her position at the restaurant and her economic studies to infiltrate Madrid's business circles. The young woman discovered she had a natural talent for this world of subterfuge and complex strategy. Aided by her ability to move invisibly between two cultures, the first blow was financial. Keiko publicly revealed through an anonymous dossier sent to financial newspapers Roberto's tax irregularities, documents she had obtained by bribing members of his own staff. The effect was devastating. The tax office immediately opened an investigation. Investors began pulling funds, and his company's value plummeted 40% in a week. Roberto immediately understood he was under attack, but couldn't identify the enemy. The evidence was too precise to be coincidental, too targeted to be generic. Someone had been studying him for years. He hired private investigators to discover who was behind the attack, but Keiko had covered her tracks too well. The second blow was personal. Keiko had photographs documenting Roberto's extramarital affairs over the last 10 years delivered to his wife through a mutual friend. Photos she had obtained by hiring investigators who had been following Roberto since 2010. The woman, upon discovering her husband's systematic betrayal, Tio, immediately filed for divorce and separation of assets, taking half the family fortune. But it was the third blow that showed the truly ruthless nature of this war. Keiko managed to convince Roberto's eldest son, Marcos, to meet with Sophia at a downtown bar. The young woman, posing as a freelance journalist interested in a story about the Castilla family, gradually revealed the truth about the 1994 accident to Marcos. She showed him the evidence, the documents, the photographs. The young man was devastated to discover his father was a killer. Roberto realized someone knew his darkest secret when Marcos confronted him that same night, asking about Hiroshi Tanaka's death. The reaction was immediate and violent. Roberto understood the time had come to physically eliminate the threat before his past completely destroyed his present. He started with Sophia. Roberto had identified the young woman as the key connection between him and the mysterious enemy. He had Sophia followed by professionals. He discovered where she lived, what her habits were. Then he arranged what was meant to look like a casual accident, a car whose brakes failed just as Sophia was crossing the street near the university. But Keiko had anticipated even this move. Her bodyguards had been protecting Sophia for weeks. They intervened at the crucial moment, pushing the young woman out of the assassin car's path. The driver, a criminal hired by Roberto, crashed into a tree and died instantly before he could confess who had paid him. The failed assassination attempt was the declaration of open war. Keiko understood Roberto was willing to do anything to protect his secret, including murder. Sophia realized for the first time how dangerous the game she was playing was, but instead of withdrawing, both women decided to intensify their attack. The final blow was already in preparation. a press conference where Keiko would publicly reveal her son's killer's identity, backed by irrefutable evidence in Sophia's testimony as interpreter and witness. But Roberto had planned his final move to eliminate both women during the press conference itself, making it look like a random terrorist attack. The final battle between justice and impunity was about to begin. The press conference was held at Madrid's most luxurious hotel, with international journalists drawn by the promise of a shocking revelation involving important establishment figures. Keiko had orchestrated everything with military precision. Every detail had been planned to maximize the media impact of her revelation. Sophia sat beside Keiko, her heart pounding uncontrollably as she simultaneously translated the woman's statements from Japanese to Spanish for the reporters present. What was about to happen would forever change their lives and Roberto Castilla's. But neither of them knew the man had planted an explosive in the hotel, programmed to detonate right during the conference. Keiko began by telling Hiroshi's story, the brilliant son who dreamed of building cultural bridges between Japan and Spain. She showed photos of the smiling young man. She spoke of his broken dreams, of a mother's pain at losing everything. The journalist listened in reverent silence as Sophia translated each word with an emotional precision that conveyed all of Keiko's suffering. Then came the revelation. Keiko publicly accused Roberto Castilla of killing her son in 1994 and covering up the crime using family connections. The evidence was overwhelming. Official documents proving Roberto's presence in Madrid that night, testimonies from mechanics who had repaired the damaged BMW, recordings of incriminating conversations. The effect on the media was explosive, even before the actual explosion. Television stations interrupted their programming to broadcast the statements live. Social media flooded with the story. Castilla Company stock values plummeted in real time. Roberto was watching everything from his office, knowing his life was ending before his eyes. But it was at that moment that Sophia made the discovery that changed everything. Noticing something odd in the nervous behavior of one of the hotel employees, she managed to identify the explosive hidden under the stage. With a courage she didn't know she possessed, she immediately stopped the conference and evacuated the room seconds before detonation. The explosion destroyed much of the conference room but caused no casualties thanks to Sophia's timely intervention. The evidence against Roberto had already been broadcast worldwide, and now an attempted mass murder was added to the charges. There was no escape left for him. Roberto Castillo was arrested that same night. The evidence Keiko had gathered over 30 years of investigation, combined with the failed assassination attempt, built an unassailable legal case. The man who had believed he could forever escape the consequences of his actions finally found himself face to face with justice. Roberto Castilla's trial became the most followed court case in Spain that year. Sophia testified as interpreter and key witness, recounting in detail the encounter at the restaurant, Keiko's confession, and the failed assassination attempt. Her testimony was crucial in demonstrating the defendant's premeditation and dangerousness. Keiko was finally able to tell her complete story publicly. 30 years of pain, investigation, and sacrifice to obtain justice for her son. Her account moved all of Spain and became a symbol of the fight against impunity for the powerful. Roberto was sentenced to life imprisonment for voluntary homicide, attempted mass murder, and a series of other financial crimes that emerged during the investigations. Sophia became an involuntary celebrity, the brave young woman who had saved dozens of lives and helped a mother obtain justice. But she preferred to stay focused on her studies. Though now, with a completely different perspective on international justice and human rights. Keiko offered Sophia a full scholarship to finish university and then work at her foundation dedicated to victims of unsolved crimes. The young woman accepted, understanding her destiny was linked to the fight for social justice. Together, they founded a center that helped families of victims of unpunished crimes. Using Keiko's wealth and Sophia's linguistic and investigative skills, the El Dorado restaurant became famous worldwide as the place where one of modern history's most incredible stories of justice had begun. Manager Condi, initially terrified by the scandal, discovered the notoriety had brought clients from all over the world, curious to see where it all began. 5 years after that night that changed everything, Sophia graduated magna cum laude in international economics with a thesis on transnational financial crimes. Keiko was present at the ceremony, proud of the young woman she now considered an adopted daughter. Together, they had transformed pain into hope, vengeance into social justice. The Hiroshi Tanaka Foundation had become one of the world's most respected human rights organizations, with offices in 10 countries and hundreds of resolved cases. Sophia had become the European director, specializing in crimes involving foreign victims and language barriers that often prevented access to justice. Keiko had finally found the peace she had sought for 30 years. She had not only obtained justice for Hiroshi, but had transformed her personal tragedy into a force for good that helped hundreds of other families. Roberto Castilla was serving a life sentence. All his assets had been confiscated to compensate his victims. The story of that night at the restaurant continued to be told, becoming a symbol of how one person's courage can change many others' destinies. Sophia often returned to the El Dorado restaurant, no longer as a waitress but as a guest, remembering the night when two simple words in Japanese had unleashed a revolution of justice. On the table where Keiko had sat that first night, there was now a discreet plaque reminding people of the importance of reaching out to those in need, regardless of the language they speak. Because sometimes understanding the right words at the right moment is enough to save a life and change the world. The last time Keiko and Sophia dined together at the restaurant, the older woman looked at the young woman she had helped and said, in perfect Spanish, a language she had learned to honor her son's dream. Hiroshi would have been proud of you. You've realized his dream of building bridges between cultures, but you've done it in the most beautiful way possible, through justice. Sophia smiled, knowing her life had found a meaning far beyond what she ever could have imagined when she was just a student working her way through college. Sometimes destiny calls us through the simplest words spoken in the right language at the right moment. And when we answer that call, everything can change. The story of Keiko and Sophia showed that justice can arrive even after decades, that a mother's love for her son can overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes all it takes is a brave young woman who speaks Japanese to change the course of history. Because the right words spoken at the right time can tear down walls built with 30 years of lies and open the doors to a future of truth and hope. Like if you believe justice can arrive even after decades, comment about which moment impacted you most in this story. Share to inspire those who have never stopped seeking the truth. Subscribe for more stories of justice, courage, and redemption. Sometimes knowing the right language is enough to change a life. Sometimes courage is found in the most unexpected moments. And sometimes justice arrives through the hands of those you least expect. Because every word spoken from the heart can become a bridge to hope.